The detective showed me security footage of my brother robbing a bank. My brother has been dead for 2 years. The timestamp on the footage read, March 14th, 2024, 9:47 a.m. The man on screen walked into First National Credit Union wearing a charcoal gray hoodie and dark jeans, his face partially obscured by a baseball cap and surgical mask. He moved with a particular gait I recognized instantly, that slight favor of the left leg from the motorcycle accident when he was 19, the way his shoulders rolled forward when he walked like he was perpetually bracing against wind. Detective Raymond Okonkwo paused the video at the exact moment the man looked up at the camera, and my coffee cup slipped from my fingers, shattering against the interrogation room floor. The eyes staring back at me through the grainy footage belonged to Gavin, my brother Gavin, whose funeral I attended 26 months ago. My brother Gavin, whose ashes I scattered in Lake Michigan because he always said he wanted to be somewhere vast and free. My brother Gavin, who was apparently alive and robbing banks in suburban Ohio, while I had been lighting candles on his birthday and talking to his grave marker like he could somehow hear me through 6 feet of frozen earth. I'd been working as a project manager at a mid-sized engineering firm for almost 4 years when Detective Okonkwo showed up at my apartment on a Thursday evening, badge out and expression carefully neutral. He was a tall man with graying temples and the kind of tired eyes that suggested he'd seen too much to be surprised by anything anymore. But something about the way he kept glancing at my face told me this case had thrown him off balance. He asked if I had a brother named Gavin Mercer, and I told him I did, past tense, that Gavin had died in a boating accident off the coast of Michigan in January 2022. The detective nodded slowly, wrote something in a small leather notebook, and asked if I would be willing to come down to the station to look at some footage that might be relevant to an ongoing investigation. I agreed because I had nothing to hide, and because some part of me was curious what possible connection a dead man could have to whatever case this detective was working. I realize now that curiosity has a price, and sometimes that price is having your entire understanding of reality dismantled in a fluorescent-lit room that smells like burnt coffee and desperation. The footage showed the man entering the credit union, approaching the counter with unhurried confidence, and sliding a note to the teller that apparently demanded cash in unmarked bills. No weapon was visible, but the teller's face went white, and she began emptying her drawer with shaking hands. The whole thing took less than 3 minutes. The man walked out with approximately $12,000 in a canvas bag and disappeared around the corner of the building where the exterior cameras lost him. Detective Okonkwo explained that this was the 4th robbery in 6 months, matching the same pattern, same build, same gait, same methodology, and that facial recognition software had flagged a 63% match to my brother's driver's license photo from 2019. I told him that was impossible, that Gavin was dead, that I had watched them pull his body from the water and identified him at the morgue. The detective's expression didn't change. That's what we need to talk about, Mr. Mercer, because according to our records, no body was ever recovered from that boating accident. The death certificate was issued based on presumptive death after the Coast Guard suspended their search. The room tilted sideways. No body recovered. But I remembered identifying him. I remembered the morgue. I remembered the sheet being pulled back. I called my mother from the police station parking lot, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice bright and unsuspecting, asking if I wanted to come over for dinner on Sunday because she was making Gavin's favorite lasagna in his memory since his birthday was coming up. I asked her point blank if she remembered going to the morgue with me after the accident, if she remembered identifying Gavin's body, and she went quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. When she finally spoke, her voice had changed completely, gone flat and careful in a way that made the hair on my arms stand up. She said she didn't know what I was talking about, that there had been no body, that we had held a memorial service with an empty casket because the Coast Guard never found him. She asked why I was bringing this up now, why I was trying to hurt her by making her relive the worst day of her life. I hung up without answering because I was suddenly not sure which memories were real. I could picture the morgue so clearly, the blue-white lighting, the chemical smell, the way Gavin's face had looked peaceful, despite the bloating from the water. But my mother was saying none of that happened, that we buried empty air and called it closure. Either my memory was completely fabricated, or my mother was lying to me. I spent the next 3 days tearing apart my apartment looking for evidence of what had actually happened after Gavin's supposed death. I found the funeral program, the sympathy cards, the obituary I had clipped from the newspaper and kept in my desk drawer. I found photos from the memorial service showing my mother and me standing beside a closed casket surrounded by white flowers. But I couldn't find any documentation from a morgue visit, no paperwork from a body identification, nothing that proved I had ever seen my brother's corpse with my own eyes. I started to wonder if grief had created false memories, if my brain had filled in the gaps of an incomplete narrative with details it invented to give me closure. The human mind is capable of astonishing self-deception when the alternative is too painful to bear. But something didn't add up. I remembered the weight of it, the visceral reality of seeing death made physical in someone I loved. That kind of memory doesn't come from nowhere. I called my cousin Felicity, who had been close to Gavin and had helped plan the memorial, and asked her if she remembered anything about a body identification. She hesitated for just a moment too long before saying she thought I had handled all of that alone, that the family had trusted me to take care of the arrangements. Detective Okonkwo called me back to the station on Friday to inform me that a fifth robbery had occurred, this one at a savings and loan in Akron. The footage was clearer this time, better lighting, higher resolution, and when he played it for me, I felt my stomach turn inside out. The man on screen had removed his mask briefly to scratch his nose, just a flash of exposed face, maybe 2 seconds total. But it was enough. The nose was Gavin's, slightly crooked from being broken in a bar fight when he was 23. The jawline was Gavin's, sharp and angular in a way that made him look perpetually skeptical. The scar above his left eyebrow was Gavin's, from the time he fell off the garage roof trying to retrieve a frisbee when we were kids. My brother was alive. My brother had faked his death. My brother was robbing banks while I grieved for him, while our mother lit candles in his memory, while I built my entire understanding of loss around a lie he had constructed. The detective watched my face as I processed this information, and I could see him cataloging my reactions, trying to determine if I was an accomplice or a victim. I told him I had no idea Gavin was alive, that I had genuinely believed he was dead for over 2 years. He nodded, wrote something down, and slid a business card across the table. If your brother contacts you, call me immediately. And Mr. Mercer, don't try to handle this yourself. We're dealing with federal charges now. The FBI got involved after the 6th robbery, which crossed state lines into Pennsylvania and triggered federal jurisdiction. Special Agent Marlene Blackwood showed up at my apartment 3 days later, a compact woman with short silver hair and the kind of direct eye contact that made you feel like she could see through your skull. She asked me detailed questions about Gavin's financial history, his relationships, his mental health in the years before his disappearance. I answered as honestly as I could, describing my brother as someone who had always been charming and restless, never satisfied with stability, always chasing the next thrill or scheme. He'd been a day trader for a while, then a real estate investor, then briefly tried his hand at cryptocurrency before the market crashed. Nothing ever stuck, because Gavin got bored easily and had expensive tastes he couldn't quite afford. Agent Blackwood nodded like this confirmed something she had suspected. We've traced the stolen funds from the first 4 robberies. Most of it was funneled into offshore accounts, but a significant portion was deposited into a domestic account under a shell company registered in Delaware. That company's sole beneficiary is a trust established 18 months before your brother's supposed death. Want to guess whose name is on the trust documents? I felt the blood drain from my face. I didn't want to guess. I already knew. The trust was in our mother's name. Diane Mercer, age 64, retired schoolteacher, was listed as the primary beneficiary of a trust that had received over $40,000 in stolen money from bank robberies committed by her supposedly dead son. Agent Blackwood showed me the documents, the banking records, the paper trail that connected my mother directly to Gavin's criminal operation. I sat in my apartment after she left, staring at the wall, trying to reconcile the mother who had raised me with someone who would help her son fake his death and profit from armed robbery. Except the robberies weren't armed, not technically. Gavin never showed a weapon, just implied one through notes demanding compliance. But that was still federal bank robbery, still a minimum of 5 years per count, still enough to destroy everything my mother had built in her quiet, careful life. I called her again, and this time I didn't ask about morgue visits or body identifications. I asked her directly if she knew Gavin was alive. The silence on the other end of the line stretched out for almost 30 seconds. Then she said, very quietly, "Don't come here, sweetheart. Don't get involved in this. Just forget you ever saw that footage and move on with your life." Then she hung up, and when I called back, the number had been disconnected. I drove to my mother's house that night, a 3-hour trip through dark highways and darker thoughts. The house was empty when I arrived, furniture covered in sheets, refrigerator cleaned out, no sign that anyone had lived there for days. She had run. My mother had run, which meant she knew what was coming and had chosen to disappear rather than face it. I stood in the kitchen where I had eaten thousands of meals, where Gavin and I had done homework at the table while our mother cooked dinner, where we had celebrated birthdays and mourned our father's death and built a family that I now realized had been partially built on lies. I found a note taped to the inside of the medicine cabinet, written in my mother's careful handwriting. "Connor, I'm sorry. I never wanted you involved in any of this. Your brother needed help, and I was the only one who could give it. By the time you understand why I did what I did, I hope you can forgive me. Don't try to find us. It's better for everyone if you let this go." But I couldn't let it go. My brother was a criminal. My mother was his accomplice. And I was the idiot who had spent 2 years grieving a man who wasn't dead, lighting candles for someone who was probably laughing at my sentimentality while counting stolen money. Agent Blackwood put me in contact with a forensic accountant named Dr. Theodore Nguyen, who specialized in tracking financial crimes across complex webs of shell companies and offshore accounts. He was a small man with wire-rimmed glasses and an almost unsettling enthusiasm for spreadsheets, and he walked me through everything the FBI had uncovered about Gavin's operation over 3 hours in a conference room that smelled like stale pizza and dry erase markers. The scheme had started almost 4 years ago, long before the faked death, when Gavin had begun accumulating debt from failed investments and increasingly risky financial gambles. He owed money to people who didn't accept excuses, the kind of people who broke kneecaps first and asked questions never. The faked death wasn't about escaping prosecution. It was about escaping debts that had become life-threatening. The robberies were supposed to be temporary, a way to generate enough cash to pay off what he owed and start fresh somewhere else with a new identity. But somewhere along the line, Gavin had gotten comfortable with the income stream and kept going even after the original debts were cleared. Dr. Nguyen estimated he had stolen over $180,000 across the 6 confirmed robberies, with roughly half going to our mother's trust and the rest disappearing into accounts the FBI was still tracing. I asked Dr. Nguyen why Gavin would involve our mother, why he would put her at risk like this. The accountant shrugged in that way people do when they've seen too much human ugliness to be surprised by any of it. Desperation makes people do terrible things to the people they love. Your brother probably convinced himself he was helping her, setting her up for a comfortable retirement, giving her financial security she never had as a teacher's salary. People are remarkably good at constructing narratives that make themselves the hero of their own story, even when they're clearly the villain. He was right, of course. Gavin had always had that gift, the ability to frame his worst impulses as noble sacrifice, to make you feel like his failures were actually evidence of his depth and complexity. I had fallen for it my entire life, defending him to girlfriends and employers and friends who saw through his charm to the selfishness underneath. But I never thought he would do something like this. I never thought he would make me mourn him while he counted stolen money somewhere out of reach. The break in the case came from an unexpected source. Gavin's ex-girlfriend, Monica, reached out to me through LinkedIn of all places, saying she had seen news coverage of the bank robberies and recognized the gate immediately. Monica and Gavin had dated for 3 years before his supposed death, and she had been devastated by his loss in a way that always made me slightly uncomfortable, given how badly he had treated her during their relationship. She agreed to meet me at a coffee shop in Cleveland, and when she arrived, I could see she had been crying. She told me that Gavin had contacted her 6 months ago, out of the blue, asking if she still loved him, if she would run away with him to Costa Rica, where he had set up a new life under a different name. She had thought it was a cruel prank at first, someone impersonating him to hurt her, but he knew details about their relationship that no one else could have known. He'd asked her to wait for him, promised he was almost done with the work, and would have enough money for them to live comfortably forever. She had agonized over whether to report him, but her love had made her weak, had made her keep his secret, even when she knew it was wrong. Monica gave me something that changed everything, a burner phone Gavin had sent her with his contact number saved in it. She said he called her every few weeks, always from different numbers, always late at night when he was feeling lonely or sentimental. She hadn't heard from him in almost a month, not since the FBI involvement had made the news, but she thought maybe the number could still be useful. I turned the phone over to Agent Blackwood, who passed it to their technical specialists for analysis. Within 48 hours, they had traced the phone's location data to a pattern of cell tower pings concentrated in a specific area of rural Kentucky. Gavin wasn't in Costa Rica. He was hiding in the United States, probably waiting for the heat to die down before making his final escape. They mobilized a team to investigate, and Agent Blackwood gave me a choice. I could stay home and wait for news, or I could ride along in a support capacity, present in case Gavin could be talked into surrendering peacefully. I chose to go. Not because I wanted to help my brother avoid consequences, but because I needed to look him in the face and ask him how he could have done this to me. The safe house was a converted barn on a property registered to yet another shell company, surrounded by acres of empty farmland and accessed by a single unpaved road. The FBI tactical team approached at dawn, surrounding the structure while a negotiator tried to establish contact through a megaphone. For almost an hour, nothing happened. Then the front door opened, and my brother walked out with his hands up, looking older and thinner than I remembered, but unmistakably alive. He saw me standing behind the line of agents, and his face did something complicated, cycling through surprise and guilt, and something that might have been relief. They cuffed him and put him in the back of an armored vehicle, and as they drove past me, Gavin caught my eyes through the window and mouthed something I couldn't quite make out. It might have been, "I'm sorry." It might have been, "I love you." It might have been nothing at all, just the movement of lips with no meaning behind them. I'll never know for certain, and maybe that ambiguity is the punishment I deserve for believing he was capable of change. They found our mother in a motel room 3 miles from the safe house, along with $60,000 in cash and false identity documents for both her and Gavin. She was arrested without resistance, sitting on the edge of the bed with her hands folded in her lap, like she had been waiting for this moment for 2 years. Agent Blackwood told me later that my mother had been completely cooperative during her interrogation, providing detailed accounts of how she had helped Gavin plan the fake death, how she had deposited stolen money while knowing exactly where it came from, how she had watched me grieve her son while keeping his secret locked behind her teeth. She said she did it because he was her child, and a mother's love doesn't come with conditions. She said she would do it again, if she had to. She said she was sorry I had to find out like this, that she had always hoped I would never know. The apology felt hollow coming through an FBI agent's mouth instead of directly from her, but I suppose that was fitting. Our whole family had become experts at communicating through intermediaries and lies. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I attended every day, sitting in the gallery and watching my brother and mother face the consequences of choices they had made without me. Gavin was charged with 6 counts of federal bank robbery, multiple counts of fraud and identity theft, and conspiracy charges that carried additional weight because he had involved our mother. His lawyer, a public defender named Anita Stromberg, argued for leniency based on the circumstances that had driven him to fake his death in the first place, painting a picture of a man desperate to escape dangerous creditors who would have killed him over unpaid debts. The prosecution, led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Douglas Kim, methodically demolished every attempt at sympathy by showing the jury evidence of how Gavin had continued robbing banks long after those original debts were paid. How he had lived comfortably in his Kentucky safe house with satellite television and a fully stocked kitchen while his brother lit candles for a dead man who wasn't dead. How he had strung along an ex-girlfriend with promises of romantic escape while using her emotions as insurance against getting caught. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. My mother pled guilty to avoid a trial, accepting a deal that would give her 8 years with possibility of parole after 5. She was 64 years old when she was sentenced. She'll be almost 70 before she has any chance of getting out. I visited her once, about a month after she was transferred to the Federal Women's Facility in West Virginia. She looked smaller than I remembered, diminished by the beige uniform and the fluorescent lighting and the weight of what she had done. I asked her the question I had been carrying since the detective first showed me that footage. Why hadn't she told me? Why had she let me grieve alone? Let me light candles and visit an empty grave and torture myself with memories of a brother who was alive the whole time? She looked at me with eyes that had lost some essential light and said, "Because I knew you'd do the right thing. I knew you'd turn him in. And I couldn't let that happen." She said it like it was obvious, like any mother would do the same, like protecting one child at the expense of another was just basic parenting. I left without saying goodbye and haven't been back since. Gavin got 18 years. He'll be almost 50 when he gets out, assuming he serves the full sentence and doesn't earn any reductions for good behavior. I don't plan to visit him. I don't plan to answer if he calls. I don't plan to include him in any version of my life going forward because the brother I loved died that day. The Coast Guard supposedly found his body, and the man who took his place is a stranger who shares my DNA, but nothing else that matters. The therapist I started seeing after the trial, Dr. Ramona Fitzgerald, says this kind of clean break is sometimes necessary for survivors of family betrayal, that I'm not obligated to maintain relationships with people who have demonstrated they're willing to destroy me for their own benefit. She says the grief I felt for 2 years was real even if its object was fictional, that I'm allowed to mourn the brother I thought I had without feeling any obligation to the brother who actually existed. I'm working on believing her. Some days are easier than others. It's been 14 months since the arrests now. I still live in the same apartment, still work at the same engineering firm, still have the same friends who rallied around me when the news broke, and have slowly stopped asking how I'm doing with that tone that suggests they expect me to fall apart. I'm not falling apart. I'm just living with the knowledge that the two people who were supposed to love me unconditionally both chose to let me suffer rather than face consequences for their actions. I'm living with the memory of lighting birthday candles for a dead man while he watched television in a converted barn and waited for the statute of limitations to pass. I'm living with the understanding that love, real love, isn't supposed to be a weapon or a secret or a justification for cruelty. The family I grew up in is gone, replaced by something I'm still learning to define. But I'm still here. I survived my brother's fake death and his real betrayal and my mother's complicity and the destruction of every assumption I had about the people who raised me. Some nights I still dream about that moment in the interrogation room, watching the footage of my brother walking into a bank like he had every right to be there, like the rules that governed the rest of us simply didn't apply to him. In the dreams, sometimes he looks directly at the camera and winks, like he knows I'll see this eventually, like the whole thing was a performance staged specifically for my benefit. I wake up from those dreams with my heart pounding and my sheets soaked with sweat, and I have to remind myself that he's in a federal prison now, that he can't hurt me anymore, that the story is over even if the wound isn't healed. Dr. Fitzgerald says the dreams will fade eventually, that trauma has a timeline even when it doesn't feel like it, that one day I'll go weeks without thinking about what happened, and then months, and then maybe someday I'll be able to remember my childhood without the bitter taste of knowing it was built on foundations I never understood. I'm choosing to believe her because the alternative is accepting that my brother broke something in me that can't be fixed, and I refuse to give him that power. He took 2 years of my grief. He took my trust in my own memories. He took my mother and my sense of family and my belief that the people closest to you are also the people most likely to protect you. He doesn't get to take my future too. The last thing I found when I finally cleaned out my desk drawer was that newspaper obituary I had clipped and saved, the one announcing Gavin's death with a photo from his college graduation and a list of surviving family members that included my name. I held it for a long time, reading the words that had once made me cry and now just made me tired. Gavin Thomas Mercer, beloved son and brother, lost too soon to a tragic accident. Every word was a lie. He wasn't lost. The accident wasn't tragic, and the love I thought was mutual had been one-sided the entire time. I burned the obituary in my kitchen sink and watched the ashes circle the drain, and when they were gone, I felt something release in my chest that I hadn't even realized I was holding. My brother has been dead to me for 2 years. Turns out I was grieving the right thing all along, just for the wrong reasons. The Gavin I loved never existed. The Gavin who did exist is in prison where he belongs, and I'm finally free to stop mourning a ghost and start building a life that doesn't include people who treat love like a transaction. Gavin called me from prison last month, his first attempt at contact since the sentencing. I let it go to voicemail and listened to his message later, his voice familiar and strange at the same time, asking if I would consider visiting, saying he had things he wanted to explain, promising that if I just gave him a chance, I would understand why he did what he did. I deleted the voicemail without responding. Then I blocked the prison's number. Some doors, once closed, should stay that way. He made his choices. I'm making mine. And the choice I'm making is to stop letting people who hurt me have any claim on my future. The brother I thought I had died 2 years ago in a boating accident that never happened. I've already mourned him. I don't need to do it again. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.